episode 147 of the Weekly podcast. Thank you very much for joining us on wherever you are, YouTube or the podcast platforms. Thanks for your support during the week. Sure, Gleason was on last week. We talked an awful lot about art, photography, cosplay, lots of different things, black and white films, which is always a good subject for me to speak about. So thanks very much to Sure. And we had some contributors to the buy me a coffee thing that we've decided to do kind of reluctantly, but I want to say thanks to Tracy and Cher for that. And it'll be in the description of this on YouTube and on the podcast thing if you want to have a look at that. That's my introduction anyway. That's that out of the way. The most important thing, we'll get our guest on. So I want to introduce my guest, who holds the Samuel Beckett Chair of Drama and Theatre at Trinity College Dublin and is the academic director of the Lir, Professor Brian Singleton. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing okay.
I want to make sure all the time with the professor thing, because I don't think you're going to be like, because sometimes if you don't call a doctor something, they might be a little bit put out. You don't mind?
That's a title I don't use outside of official university business. I'm Brian to students and Brian to everybody.
Well, that's what we like to hear. So I'm going to call you Brian instead of Professor, if that's all right. So we always start in the same place, Brian. Could you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Of my
upbringing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I grew up in just outside Armagh, and on a small farm. And I suppose it was, we lived in the country. We went to school in the town, but it was mostly a country upbringing. And I know there was no indication at an early stage what I'd end up doing in my life. And then, everyone knows the history of what happened in the 60s and 70s in the north. And when the so-called Troubles, that euphemistic term, started in 1969, I was 8 years old, and I thought, my father said, "Oh, should it be over next year?" And I remember, because we lived in a farm, we never had holidays ever. Farmers don't have holidays. So we used to go to a day out to the seaside, and we couldn't go in 69, and it was just too dangerous. And my father said, "Oh, should we go next year?" And then next year it never came. And it did eventually come back, but that was the end, really, of kind of all that, a lot of disappointment. But then, it all became normalized in a way. I was thinking back over that recently, and I remember in school all our windows were sellotaped, crisscross sellotaped, and this was for in case there was a bomb that went off and the glass wouldn't shatter all over the kids. At that time, I didn't know what that sellotape was for.
Yeah.
That's stupid. We can't see out. And I remember all those things that we didn't have fire drill, we had bomb drill. And I remember we don't have leaving cert up in the north. It was A levels, at the age of 18, and I had got my driving license at the age of 17. You have to. You live in the country. You can't go anywhere without a driving license. And so I was driving my father's car in for the examinations, and I couldn't get in one day, one of my exams, because there was a ring of steel. The army had a ring of steel around the city. And I remember driving around the perimeter, trying to figure out how I was going to get to my exam. And I parked on a hill. I climbed over a fence and then a wall, and ran across a pitch and got into the school about 2 minutes before the exam. Like I was determined to get my exam out of the way. It's just, I mean, just sort of all those things. Kind of, I try to bury them all. There's lots of things that happened to me, and I still won't speak about it even today. But a couple of things I do remember that I can speak about, and one was around about the same time. I used to bring, on a Friday night, I used to drive my mother into town to do the shopping, the weekly shop, and I would sit outside, and then I'd wait for her to get to the cash register. I could see her at the cash register, and then I'd go in and help her take put all the shopping in the boot. And I was parked behind a car, and I thought it looked a bit suspicious, but I never said anything or did anything. And I drove off, and then we went home, and we heard this explosion, and it was a car that I was parked behind that went off. It was really, really lucky. And then, yeah, I mean, there's many instances like that that I went through, and I decided very early on that, well, I applied to Trinity College. I wanted to study at university. I applied to Queen's, and I got into both.
Right.
And but really, my great love was drama, and you couldn't do it at either institution or either city. So off I went to London. But how I got into drama is another story. I have no theatrical background, absolute zero. My father was a small farmer, and all his generations above him were small farmers. And my mother had worked in a factory, and so there was no higher education. They both left at 13, left school at 13, and so there was no one really that I knew to look up to or to aspire to or whatever. So I just followed my nose, I followed my instincts, and had I seen much theatre? No, I had to. The first real thing that I saw that really excited me was a theatre and education company, and I've been racking my brains all week trying to think and looking through the internet, and I still can't find out the name of it. But it was funded by the Arts Council of Northern Ireland to go around schools and put on plays. And the English teacher at the time asked for volunteers. Now, I always volunteered all the time to do anything to get out of class.
Yeah.
Anything different. It wasn't that I didn't like class. It
Yeah.
was just I wanted to have different experiences. And I didn't do much. I was one of about 3 or 4, and we helped unload the van, and we got the costumes and props and everything, and helped fit up the stage. And it was that was great. And then I was chatting to the actors who did everything, and then the next, all the rest of the school came into the gym, and suddenly these actors transformed into Shakespearean characters. And I sat there in awe, like, how do they do that? How do they do that? And then after lunchtime, it was an American play, I think it was Arthur Miller. And again, suddenly they were Americans. And I just thought, they've gone through all these different characters and time periods. And this is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I've this massive admiration for actors. I think they do the most extraordinary things. And that that one day blew my mind. And then there was no opportunity really in where I grew up to do any theatre. There was a school play, which is mostly for Christmas, pantomime or something. Yeah. So I wrote. I was precocious, I suppose. I wrote to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, giving out about the lack of provision for new theatre in County Armagh. Oh. And I got a letter back, putting me in touch with several people, and I ended up being a youth theatre in Portadown, and we eventually played in Belfast, and so that got me through the last year or so of my school days, and then I went off to London. So that was, it's a strange tale of growing up on a farm, and then it's like the circus came into town. It's the traveling actors came into town and swept me away with them. It was the imagination.
Of course, yeah.
I could see different worlds, and we had TV. We had black and white TV just for a long time. I think we were the last people in Armagh to get a colour TV, and we also didn't have a telephone, so there was no means of communication for a long, long time. You could only speak to the people that you actually met, and that, for me, that was idyllic. I've still had that fear of technology, right, all the way through my life. I remember. I keep saying this. I was the last person in Dublin to get a mobile phone.
Oh, were you?
Why would anyone who didn't know me want to contact me? That's what I think in my head. And if I go out, if I go out somewhere, I'm in a theatre or in a pub or wherever I am, I don't want people to know where I am. I'm with the people I'm with, and that's the only people I want to know. So this notion of status updates and selfies and all of that, just I can't get my head around it still.
Well, like, yeah, but I'm glad that you did, because then I wouldn't have got in touch with you and we wouldn't be able to have the chat. So it's the positives that you take them with you. But can I ask you this? So, because this is always a question we ask as well, and this might kind of tie in with what you were saying about. Obviously, you sounds like when it's on the farm was quite idyllic, but what was going on in Northern Ireland at the time? Like, when did you first become aware of mental health?
I suppose it was there right from the beginning. I
Mhm.
could see, when that first person was shot in Armagh, and it was the talk of everybody, and parents were trying to keep their children away from even the discussions about what was going on. But the television was blasting it out
Mhm.
every news bulletin. And my parents, that generation, were obsessed with the news. They didn't watch anything else or listen to anything else. It was the news. Everyone had to be quiet for the news.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't escape it. And so, this went on and on and on. And, I had my few close shaves and scrapes, and I knew people who had been killed, and I knew people who'd been imprisoned. But you could, as a child growing up, you can see and feel the stress,
Mhm.
but you don't necessarily equate that with mental health.
Yeah.
And I did subsequently, obviously, equate it with mental health, because there were a huge number of people who were traumatized. There's trauma. I'd say my generation had so many people who were on medication,
Yeah.
um, just to cope with what was all around them. One of the things that really bugged me, all the way through the time, and still does, was a phrase used by politicians, that British politicians at that time. It was a phrase called "an acceptable level of violence."
Mm.
That today for me is shocking. It is shocking
Yeah.
that there's no acceptable level of violence at all. And but that acceptable level of violence allowed for the deterioration of many people's mental health.
Yeah, and it's, I can imagine if there was a deep dive and a big, um, kind of investigation, if you like, into that kind of the mental health aspect of it. It must be massive, because you mentioned about the car and how close you were to the bomb, and I just happened to started reading Bono's autobiography yesterday, and he talks about he missed a bus that was going into Parnell Street,
Mm.
and that bus would have brought him into the middle of a bomb in Parnell Street. And it's just those close shaves that people talk about. And for me, obviously, like I remember the bomb in Oman and things like that, but I wasn't up there. So you are removed from it. But when I hear you talking about it, and even when you hear Bono talking about it, it's crazy to think how close that so many of hundreds and thousands of people were to death, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was your whole life was in the middle. You're literally immersed in it.
Hmm.
And how do you survive it? Is you block it out.
Yeah.
You go on with your daily business. You do your job. You go to school. You do your homework. For large parts of that time, there were curfews at night, so there was no social life. And then when that social life emerged, I'd say it was around the mid 70s, and I remember getting tickets for a band called the Darts. They were in the charts at the time, and they were playing in the Wheatley Hall at Queen's in Belfast, a small hall. And I remember there's a bunch of us I think one of us had got his provisional license, no, actually, no, it passed. And so we all piled into the car and up to
Hmm.
Belfast to see that band. And we went back about 6 months later to see Elton John. He was doing a tour with Ray Cooper, the percussionist, just the two of them.
Mm.
And that was extraordinary. I was in the third or fourth row, and he played 90 minutes just on his own on the piano.
Wow.
And then the back of the stage opened up, and Ray Cooper was rolled in with his drum kit, massive drum kit. And then he went into the rock songs. And it was like a 3-hour concert.
Wow.
It was, I felt then that this is the normality that that I'd be missing out on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's over, and then you go back to being search coming in out of school, and bags rifled, and the fact that there's nowhere culturally in my town of Armagh. There was no place to go to. There was nothing. It was school and home.
So let's open this out then. So when you obviously go through all the stuff that you did in with studying drama and things like that, when you get to this point in your life, in your career, what do you do? What is your role in Trinity?
Well, I've a couple of official titles. You mentioned the first one at the beginning. I'm Samuel Beckett Professor of Drama and Theatre. I've only been that since 2011, and before that, I started Trinity in 1990. That was my first lectureship. I had a postdoctoral fellowship from the British Academy before that, and I was at University of Glasgow. Wonderful place, wonderful people, and it's the only other place I'd live, to be honest with you, is Glasgow. Just the kind of the upfrontedness of the people. They just don't hold back, and it's so refreshing. It's brilliant, and the art scene there was in the late 80s, early 90s was incredible. Art and theatre, and then so coming to Trinity, I was just a junior lecturer, and I was 30 years old. My students were 18 to 22, but a few mature students. So there wasn't a great big gap between us. And so we were all kind of going through we were studying all this brand new, because the drama degree at Trinity started, you could do it with another subject in 84, but I was appointed in 1990 at the start of the single honours drama. So there was more students. And so yeah, I kind of went through the promotional game, and but to become Samuel Beckett Professor, it was an international competition. I had several interviews, really long interviews, and I had 3 altogether. It was daunting, I have to say, but I got it. I'm also academic director of the Lir Academy, which is the National Conservatoire for drama, and I was instrumental in setting that up in the first place. There are numerous people at Trinity, but I led the project really, and I worked incredibly closely with Danielle Ryan and her father's trust, the Cathal Ryan Trust, and we started meeting around 2009 with the first secret meetings, and then it opened. We launched it, and it became public 1st of December 2010, and we opened the doors 1st of September 2011. There was no building. There was nothing. No staff, no director, no nothing. And I was doing that on top of everything else that I was doing. So that was, it was frightening, I suppose. You just didn't know, is it going to work? And, financially, is it going to work? And, but my role now, though, I mean, I did a lot of work in the Lir Academy at the very beginning, because one of the principal tenets of it is that it's very much centered not in the university but in the industry. And so everyone who teaches there is from the industry, and I suppose my role at the beginning was to get the courses approved, to write the courses, get them approved, and also lead all these people from the profession, from the industries, to how to mark students in the university system, and so that's essentially what I was doing. The other thing that I don't have, I was teaching there at the beginning. We had the first degree in stage management and technical theatre, so I did some teaching on that, and then but now I just don't have the time. Like, my role, I'm head of the drama department at Trinity at the moment, and it's I teach an insane number of hours as well, but so I attend board meetings of the Lir Academy, and I'm on call for the staff if they need me and for anything, and I chair all the exam boards. And one of the benefits is I get to see really, really talented, creative young people doing their first performances before they leave and become professional. And that's a huge privilege. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the thing about it, I didn't like, it's relatively young, but the Lir is known, it's quite known around Ireland and outside of Ireland as well. And I think sometimes when people think of theatre, they think of actors, because they're the ones that are, front and center. But it's much, much wider than that with all the technical crew that's going on behind the scenes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the acting program is 3 years full time. I mean, it's not like going to any other university course because it's a full time commitment and it's 36 weeks a year as opposed to 24 in any other arts course. And obviously, when you're in production, you're working late. But the stage management technical degree was the first degree of its kind in Ireland, it's yeah, it attracts very, very different people to most arts courses because they are so talented and interested in all things technical. But I marvel at what they do. They have a project at the end of their degree, and I sit in and watch their presentations on those projects. I mean, some of them are cutting edge. They're really, some of them should be patented. And then the stage managers, they are, they're working on the shows all the time in different roles, and most of them are employed straight away.
Yeah.
And then there's an MFA program with strands in theatre directing and stage design, lighting design, costume design, and playwriting. And just a few days ago, I was at the showcase for the 3 playwrights who are graduating. Really, all 3 of them should be put on. They really do speak to the contemporary moment, and there were loads of fun. It was great to have an evening of comedy.
Yeah,
dark comedy actually, but comedy nonetheless. And it was great to laugh. And after the pandemic, it was great to go to the theatre and have a laugh. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And yeah, the theatre, the Lir Academy is known internationally, and I know that because I know where everyone comes from when they apply, because anyone who applies gets interviewed or auditioned for the acting course. So I'm involved in the auditions in various levels, and I see where people are applying from. And I'm also I do the admissions for the degree in drama and theatre studies, which is in the Samuel Beckett Centre. And again, I can see this year in particular we had huge numbers of international students apply to us. It was quite extraordinary, actually. But and that's reflected in the class.
Of course, yeah. If you don't mind, Brian, I'm just going to read out a quick advert and then we'll get back to it, if that's okay.
No problem.
Maybe I'll tell you then about my one time involved in a stage play where I hid backstage for the whole thing. I don't know. We'll see. I might. Okay. Anyway, so Fusion Training Centre, Monksland, Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Centre or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Centre, train like a warrior. So yeah, I remember it was transition year, Brian, and we were doing a play called Us and Them. I can't remember who it was by, which is kind of bad. But I remember the music. I remember they had People Are Strange with the Doors. They had Us and Them by Pink Floyd. But I was assigned to there was a wall in between the 2 groups. So they started becoming splintered and things like that. And I was assigned with a couple of other lads to build the wall in the break, and I just couldn't even get on the stage because there was people there. And to me, it was like the most, I don't know. It's like the most nerve-wracking thing for me just to stand on the stage. I played in bands later on, but this was when I was like 14 or 15. But so my admiration for people who can get up there and actually perform, and like you said, they transform into other people, and seeing that right before your eyes is amazing. But what do you think? And you will have spoken to a lot of actors. What do you think draws them to that kind of profession?
It's there are no two people that are the same, really. We find the a lot of people will start at a young age in youth theatre or school or whatever, community theatre or whatever. But there are many people we see who have maybe done one or two things at school, and they don't realize how talented they are.
Yeah.
And because it's not the school they go to wouldn't be a school that would be noted for their school play. But we see how talented they are.
Yeah.
And then by the time they get through three rounds of auditions, they they realize when they see the other talented people in the final round that they are good as the rest. And I think that helps them up. So it's very equalizing, the whole process of getting in, and that's obviously the people who are talented and know they're talented, but then we've got the vast majority of them don't know they're talented. How they know they're talented, but they don't know how talented they are, and how they do it. Again, everyone's different. I remember when I acted in youth theatre and school theatre. I was quite a quiet sort of guy, really quiet. I wasn't shy, but I wasn't loud, and I wasn't out there. I wasn't a so-called theatrical type, but getting out on stage, I suppose it was easier because I wasn't playing myself. I find that I was playing a character that I'd rehearsed, and actually, what really scared me was the very first time I gave a lecture at university.
Really?
Worse than going on stage.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was at Glasgow University when I was a postdoc, and it was I can't remember the course that we're doing, but I had to send them to see a play, and they went to see Macbeth, really kind of futuristic Macbeth, and I had written out my lecture in longhand, pages and pages of it in longhand, because I was terrified that I would dry up and I wouldn't be able to fill out the 55 minutes of the class, of the lecture. And so I had all these pages and pages, and I was going through them and through them. And then we got to the end, and I couldn't find the last page. I didn't know how to conclude. And all I said was, quick thinking, because it was one of two lectures. And I said, I don't know how to conclude today, but I will in the next lecture. Thank you very much. And then, of course, when all the students are gone, I found the final page. But that was terrifying. Just getting up when you're speaking about something. Yes, I did my PhD at the Shakespeare Institute. I should have not have been nervous, but I was. I'm still nervous.
Do you think now? I wouldn't say this for now, but say when you're talking about your first lecture, and I started teaching jiu-jitsu not so long ago, but I felt that when I was doing it, there was a certain level of imposter syndrome about it, that I was not ready or not. Who am I to tell these people about things? Do you think there was a case of that for you?
When I walked through Trinity College, the front square, I walked in through the front gate, and my first day. And I thought, somebody's going to tap me on the shoulder and ask me to leave.
Yeah.
That's what I felt.
Yeah.
Total imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy of this institution. I'm not worthy of teaching these students. Absolutely. That's self-doubt.
Yeah.
That's self-doubt. I don't have it as much now, but I do. I'm still, the students we get are really, really smart, and they're really well read. Much more so now because it's electronic access. Even about technology, it's great for students, and they're so well read before the class begins. And so my role has changed. Like, I used to be the person giving them the information, either orally or in the lecture, or giving handouts with information, because it wasn't available. A lot of what I was talking about wasn't available. I wasn't dealing with plays. I was dealing with all performances that didn't happen in theatres. So it's kind of radical like that.
Yeah.
And so there was no, there wasn't, this information wasn't readily available. And even seeing plays, I used to go around the embassies at different the embassies in Ireland to get videos of theatres in Japan and India and all over the place. So I wanted to show my students that theatre was different in every country. So the role now, of course, is to have access to everything. I say go and look at, give them a link to YouTube, and they'll see, a full kabuki performance. And so my role is really kind of changed into working through what it means. And the relationship between the artwork or the theatre work and its audience and how it's perceived. And a lot of what I get them to do is analyze themselves, their own subjectivities, their own prejudices, their own frames, to see how that affects what their interpretation of what they see in front of them.
You talked a little, sorry, could I just ask, because you studied interculturalism in performance. You looked into it, and like for me, and you talk about how people write now, and people perform now, and it is different. And the great thing you mentioned about Trinity, it's an international draw, I think. It's fair to say that. So, like, what did you kind of find when you were looking into that kind of interculturalism in performance?
Well, I started off, I didn't really know that the word interculturalism existed.
Right.
My PhD was on the Shakespeare plays of the Théâtre du Soleil in Paris. I'm a very big French director. And and my introduction to that work was, again, an accident. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, I did drama in French, and the French departments of all the colleges, the University of London, had an annual competition. And one of the French lecturers had seen Richard II in the Théâtre du Soleil. And it was a kind of mishmash of Elizabethan costume and Asian, like kabuki, but all the actors were athletes. I mean, incredible feats of athletics. And so for this production, we did a production of Cornelis Le Cid, cut down version, 60 minutes, to fit into the festival. And we all trained in Aikido.
Right.
We were, yeah. And so we did this version in a kind of an Aikido version, and we won everything. I got best supporting actor, best production, best director, best actor, best actor. We won everything across the board, and the college was so happy with us that I should mention Goldsmiths College, really radical art college in the 70s and 80s. I'm talking really radical, wonderful place to be, and but they sent us off to Paris to see the Théâtre du Soleil. And we saw Richard II. And again, this was the second moment in my life that I was blown away by theatre. I'd never seen anything like it. What I thought actors could do back in the schoolyard in the 70s was put to one side, because what these actors were doing was completely at a different level. And so I was asked to do a PhD. I didn't want to do a PhD. I did a master's degree, and I met a professor from the Shakespeare Institute. I was talking about what I was doing, and he said, "We want someone to come do a PhD on that." So that's how I ended up doing it. I wouldn't have, I was working. I had jobs in the Citizen Theatre in Glasgow as ASM extra, and had various other jobs. I was, beginning to work in the theatre, and so I, went to Paris and saw all this, but I'd no frame for it. I really didn't know what I was looking at, and again, with the lack of technology, I hadn't read the 1976 book or 1978 book by Edward W. Said called Orientalism, and this was about turn of the century literature, turn of the last century literature, where Europeans are writing about a so-called Orient, and misunderstanding it, misappropriating, etc., etc. The term interculturalism emerged when I came to Trinity, because I got all the books of Richard Schechner, who was avant-garde theatre artist in New York, teaching at Tisch School of the Arts. A lot of his publications were emerging, or they had emerged, but they were finally getting to Dublin, and there was that word interculturalism, and that kind of meeting with one culture with another, that intrigued me. And so I started off on that journey of looking at performances that where one culture meets another culture. But then, of course, it's the political frame around that is who's the person meeting the other person, and what's the is there an imbalance between the two? And then this is the period, in the 90s of globalization and appropriation.
Yeah.
So it's quite political. But there's a new kind of interculturalism in fact, that new interculturalism started around 2011, 2010, and it's a more ethical interculturalism, largely emerging in diasporic communities around the world. So it's kind of a grassroots upwards type culture, meeting the host culture of the country that they've come to and critiquing it. So it's not Europeans misrepresenting Japanese.
There's something brilliant though, and I just want to mention. Obviously, you mentioned Japanese, you mentioned Shakespeare, and there's, this is obviously film rather than theater, but I just kind of, it's kind of shot in a theatrical kind of setting. So when I first saw Throne of Blood by Akira Kurosawa, and it is one of my favorite films of all time, and it's I don't know, the way they looked at it, the way the Japanese looked at things like ghosts. Ghosts are very sacred and not to be scared of. Whereas over here, we're very scared of ghosts, and they stay away from them. And it just, that perspective on Shakespeare was just fascinating to me. So I did try and I started to go down a kind of a rabbit hole of looking at how things like Shakespeare in particular, I suppose, because he's been made so many different ways by so many different people, how it can be interpreted in different ways. And when you mentioned about theatre being so radical, I guess, in the 70s and 80s and things like that, they're the kind of people we need in the industries of theatre and film and whatever you're into, music, all those kind of things. And you talk about interculturalism, and it's growing and it's changing, and from 2010, 2011, it's a very exciting time for theatre. But we did go through a rocky patch, let's just say, for a couple of years. How do you see theatre coming back? Do you see it coming back as strong as it was before?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Obviously, the pandemic put a hold on a lot of the creativity, but that all that did was to bank up and store up and shore up the creativity, and then it is beginning to be unleashed again. In terms of, you talk about ghosts and Kurosawa, if you see culture around the world looking at Shakespeare, it's their version of Shakespeare, and it's their belief systems, etc., etc. And there's a long tradition in Japan, for instance, of like the classical no theatre from the 14th century, where all the characters, are dead from the beginning, and they come alive onto the stage to act out their suffering, and through acting out their suffering, they can go back appeased, and so they can rest in peace. And that's the whole premise of classical Japanese theatre. And so that belief system still, kind of lingers on in the theatre. And of course, how many people believe in the supernatural now? After Hollywood has taken it and fantasized about it, that's a big problem now for us, is representing the supernatural in any kind of way that audiences would believe in it. But in terms of theatre emerging, so I'd say that very first theatre company that I saw was in Northern Ireland was mind-blowing, and mind-blowing because I'd never seen anyone do anything like that before. Then the next big one for me was Théâtre du Soleil in Paris, and that was the acting. That was the most extraordinary feat of physicality that I've ever seen. And then in 2011, I went to two plays in the Dublin Theatre Festival by a relatively new company at that stage called New Productions, and one was called World's End Lane, and they were running, and the other one was called Laundry. And I saw Laundry first, set in the last so-called Magdalen Laundry to be closed down in Sean McDermott Street. And it was one of the most beautiful and moving and enraging pieces of perform. It wasn't theatre, but I moved. I was all alone encountering scenes. Everyone was alone, and we had no other spectators to kind of reassure us or whatever. Yeah, so we spent an hour in the institution. One of the women, one of the actors playing the women, asked me to help her escape, and of course I was put in that ethical position. Would I help someone escape?
Mm.
And I said, I will, but I don't know how to get out. I had no idea how to get out. And so she took me through the whole building again, up to the front door, and there was a guard standing at the door. And she made up a story to get out. And the guard looked at me for corroboration. And I nodded and said, yes. I told a lie. I told a lie to get her out. And she threw me into a taxi. And I had a bundle of washing to go to take to the laundry around the back. And the taxi driver stopped. The taxi driver was an actor with a taxi license. And he stopped and he said, look behind you. And she was going back into the institution again. It was based on a person who was in that particular institution who would escape every day. They wouldn't see, the nuns never knew how she got out, but she would always come back at night because she was afraid.
Wow.
She was so institutionalized. And then he drove around the Monto area in North Inner City, telling me the story of it, and then deposited me in a laundrette, a real working laundrette. I wasn't sure, is it real? Is it? But it was real. I spent then about 50 minutes working there for free. My job was, I was taking clothes out of a dryer and folding children's clothes. They belonged to some family.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, on the radio, we were listening to Marion Finucane, recording of Marion Finucane talking about the Magdalen laundries and the abuses there. Other spectator, one was ironing bed sheets, and people were coming in and depositing their, and we were literally working for free and listening to, we're free labor enforced by the theatre as a kind of analogy for. Obviously, we could leave, so it's. But it was the most moving thing I'd ever seen, and again, the actors were so up close, and that there was no. It's very hard to determine what was real and what was not real, and that meant, when I went out on the street again, I went back into Dublin, into the city centre, and I was questioning everything. I just thought everything was everything was a performance, and what was real, what was not real, and I haven't stopped talking about that show.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's like separation of the performers and the audience. There's no longer a line between the two. It's fascinating. I thought you were going to end it at the taxi, but then to go to an actual laundrette, that's incredible.
And at the end of it, some of the three spectators were driven separately to the laundrette and all put to work separately. And then the three of us were taken back to where we started, and the taxi driver gave us a bar of, I think it's carbolic soap, and the smell of that, wrapped up with brown paper with our names written on it. So this is like, there was a lot of, there was one scene where I was asked to memorize the names of 6 women. That list of all the women who were in that had been in that institution, I had to memorize, and they're all called Brady, and I memorized. I spent the entire 2 hours of the performance going over those names. I was afraid of forgetting them because I didn't know what the consequences would be of forgetting them. There were no consequences.
Yeah,
it was just that feeling that I must remember them. So it was about memory and remembering. And I got a memento so that I'd never forget it. And this bar of carbolic soap I put in a filing cabinet in my office, and it stank the office for years afterwards. But anyone come in would say, "What's that smell?" And I'd tell them
the story.
Yeah.
Well, that's. I mean, I'm going to have to look that up because that's an amazingly brave piece of theatre and a piece of writing and well, everything involved in it. It's incredible. And I had a question of what some of your favorite experiences from the theatre, but obviously we've gone through a few. So I really we could talk about drama all day, to be fair. But I want to know what your love or where your love for Eurovision came from.
Well, where do I start? You've got to go back to Armagh, actually.
Okay.
in 1971 when I went to big school, and I started learning French. And actually, it was in 70. I knew I was going to be studying French, so I got, I think it was Linguaphone or something, which I bought like a tape.
Right.
I hadn't a clue what it was talking about. I had no notion. Uh, and the first teacher we had, there was an experiment, I believe, in the North at that time of putting in native speakers into schools to teach the
Oh,
language. And I remember we had a French guy who he wouldn't allow any English in the class at all.
right.
And so the whole thing was done in French. And we had the best time ever. We had
Okay.
it was a laugh from beginning to end. And my love for the language came from that point. And also, Adana had won
Hmm.
in 1970. It was in the Gaiety Theatre in 71. And I allowed to stay up to watch it? I think I was, bits of it.
Mm.
And I don't think I was allowed to stay up for the whole thing. And I heard all these languages, all these, well, particularly French language. And of course, I could understand it.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, the spectacle of there's other people are in the rest of the world, and
Yeah.
they're not the same as us, and they're speaking French, and I can understand it.
Yeah.
And that was my love for travel, languages, different cultures, and it stemmed from that. And so it was a time, once in the year on TV, and it was a black and white TV where it was all either Irish or British programming,
Mm.
and some Hollywood movies, but we knew they were Hollywood. But this was live. It was a competition, and these were real people singing in their own languages, and all being together in the one place. And so for me, that was exciting. And have I been a Eurovision lover all the way through? No, I haven't.
Okay.
I fell out with it. Well, as you're going through your life, you have different priorities
Of
in
course.
your life. And I suppose around the noughties, I wasn't particularly interested. I didn't think the music was really good. So I would still watch it,
Mm.
and I've been to Eurovision parties and whatever. But it was later on that we had a PhD student who was a theatre critic, but she'd come to Dublin and realised Eurovision was a thing.
Okay.
She'd been to a Eurovision party,
Mm.
never hadn't a clue what was going on. And she was really interested in exploring this phenomenon. And she stayed on to do a postdoc, Karen Fricker, and stayed on to do a postdoc. And I was involved in it. We got some money to hire Elena Moreo, who was our research assistant, and she's the one that went out and did the interviews. And we interviewed her. Her interview to get the job
Mm.
was to interview me as a Eurovision fan.
Okay.
And she was absolutely brilliant. She got me to say things I'd never would have said before, and so we had all these transcripts of interviews. We had to anonymize them, and then it was lots of publications come out of it, but we first spoke about it at a conference in the University of Helsinki in
Right.
2008. During the Eurovision week, so a lot of the people, fans and TV people, came to hear a lecture on it, and then since then we set up the Eurovision Research Network, which is performance scholars, musicologists, media people, and so we've had relationships with the institution at the European Broadcasting Union. I ended up being on the jury of the Malta national,
Oh,
the national song contest in 2010. That was exciting.
yeah.
It was a bit like the X Factor, and so there were moments like that, but also we did a lot of publications. We were, still I'm getting people working in media for information. Like
Yeah.
they ring us up, from Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and then I was known as a Eurovision scholar,
Yeah.
and I got a call or an email from a TV journalist in Latvia, and he did an interview with me, and he won an award for his interview with me. because it was a radio interview, but the website had created a cartoon. I was a cartoon character.
Oh,
Um,
right.
and all the people I was talking about Eurovision were all. So it was that cartoon that actually won, but it was a black and white cartoon. And then
I think I've seen it. I think I've seen it. Yeah.
and then the following year, he was working for Wheatley, which is the Finnish national broadcaster, and he interviewed me again. This time it was in color, so I was, getting known for being a
Mm.
kind of not a scholar but a cartoon character,
Yeah.
which I used on my Twitter profile
Yeah.
for, and yeah, so I've been in and out of Eurovision. I've been behind the scenes. I've been in rehearsals and just gleaning as much information and talking to people, interviewing them all the time, because there's so much that goes. I'm actually more interested in what goes on behind the scenes.
Mm.
European Broadcasting Union said that Eurovision must not be political. There must be any political content. My view of that's great. Yeah, it's a great aspiration. But when you put a flag on top of a song, it's political.
Yeah.
It really is political. And so, I'd be in some years I'd be in the press room when a scandal would break out, and there'd be a
Right.
scandal emerge, and you see all the journalists rushing to interview. The excitement was absolutely fantastic, and of course you don't know who's going to win, and
Have you?
that's the excitement now.
Yeah, like of course. And what would be your highlights? Those moments that maybe you don't have to have attended the actual ceremony, but say ones that you've seen on TV. What would be some of your big moments in the Eurovision?
Riverdance.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I don't know what year was that, Brian? About 95 or was it
No, it's 94, I think.
94? So I was 12, and I was watching it at the time, and even my mind was blown at 12. And Irish dancing for a 12-year-old isn't considered cool. It became pretty cool, to be fair.
Yeah, I was in my first flat in Dublin. I
Right.
just started at Trinity. Nobody knew me as a Eurovision fan at all, and so we'd no mobile phones or anything. And I watched Riverdance. It was the year Rock and Roll Kids, I think.
Another great song, yeah.
I think it was that year, and Ireland wasn't expected to do well at all because it was the third of the
Oh,
win,
yeah.
and we just assumed that RTE had told everyone don't vote for us,
Yeah.
and but it was a great song, and but it was the interval act of all. There hasn't been a better interval act at
Yeah.
all, and the hairs in the back of my neck stood up because it's that final scene of all these young people of Ireland dancing their hearts out. It was that body, that huge body of dancers that I just got on the phone and was talking to people straight away. I almost missed the voting because it was basically I was ringing people. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Did you see that? That was extraordinary. And then I wanted to get my hands on it. I hadn't recorded it on VHS. And then eventually RTE did release some kind of VHS recording. And then, of course, went on to being a global phenomenon. But that was a key moment. In terms of songs, I've had my favorite songs in the 70s, but it was the 60th anniversary of Eurovision. I can't remember the year now, 2005, and it was held in Copenhagen. And so there were all the winners and stars from through the years, but not all of them were there. There was a Spanish group called Mocedades. They never won, but the song was a real hit around Europe. And I think there was a band of six, and only three survived. And the fact that there were gaps on the stage was just something. And I was in second row behind Anne-Marie David, who won in 1973, I think. And so it was, for me, it was a kind of nostalgia moment that was special. And then the first Eurovision real one that I attended was in Athens, when Lordi won.
Oh, yeah.
The rock, monster rock. And I was on a bus. I was accredited for that so I had a badge and I could get free bus rides and stuff. Special Eurovision buses, and I was on a bus ride with them. And
Oh yeah,
there were stories in the press. They wouldn't talk to you. They were
yeah.
in character. Once they left the hotel room, they were in character.
Okay.
And there were stories going around that they worship the devil. There was others just ridiculous things,
Yeah.
probably pumped out by the PR people in Finland to get a story. But it was again. I love the song because it's a pop song. It's a
Yeah,
pop
of
song
course.
with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
rock feel to it and Weird Monsters. But when you're in the arena, they had so much pyrotechnics. I think my eyebrows got singed at one point, and but then when they won, I got a bus back, like 1 o'clock in the morning, back to my hotel, and there was some fans that on the bus. One was weeping. He said it was the end of Eurovision.
Oh.
Oh yeah, I thought because some people thought there was a Eurovision formula, and this had been
Mm,
broken. And I thought, oh, don't be ridiculous. I
mm.
didn't say that to him. I
Yeah.
let him have his weepy moment. But it turned out to be an iconic moment in the Eurovision history.
Do you know a thing, Brian? Last night, I live with my housemate, and she watches Strictly Come Dancing. So I was sitting downstairs, I was reading my book, and swear I wasn't watching it. And no, but Sam Ryder came on. He was introducing something. But what I noticed about the Sam Ryder song Spaceman last year is like how great of a song it is. Well, in my opinion, and people, you mentioned Elton John earlier on. There's a lot of comparisons with Elton John and things like that. But do you? And I honestly think, and I know it didn't win, and I heard the song won and stuff. I think the songs are probably getting better in Eurovision again.
They are, without doubt,
Mm.
because the big labels are now interested in it. And the winners the previous year, Måneskin, the Italian rock band, they're big. They're now worldwide famous.
Yeah.
And there was a Finnish band that year called Blind Channel. I downloaded their first album recently. It's absolutely
Really.
fabulous. And so the big labels are now signing these
Yeah.
artists up, and they're usually signed up before they go on to the show, so they get maximum publicity. So the the director of Eurovision came to had a meeting with us in London at the Eurovision Research Network, because he was worried about, in certain countries, the narrative of Eurovision is a narrative of kitsch and camp and
Mm-hmm.
negativity, and he was particularly worried about Britain. And trying to, the BBC played up to that.
Okay.
That narrative. It was Terry Wogan who actually started it,
Nice.
but his influence in the country was huge. And then, of course, all these debates about Brexit, and people were saying that, oh, nobody votes for Britain because of Brexit. I mean,
Yeah.
absolute nonsense. Nobody votes for Britain because the songs aren't good.
Yeah.
And, there's no profile of the singers or whatever. And it was so refreshing to see it. The first instance that I saw Sam Ryder on TikTok, TikTok is where a lot of the sales,
Yeah.
a lot of the royalties come from for the songs. And once I realized he was a TikTok star, and TikTok are sponsors of Eurovision
Okay.
now for the first time last year. So he already had a massive following around the world. Excuse me. And then he went into it with a positivity.
Mm.
Sorry, Jack.
Oh, that's all right. You're just clearing your throat. I just want to say about while you're clearing your throat there, Sam was like, I don't follow TikTok, so I kind of didn't really know him, right? So I remember I was with my friend and we were watching on TV, and some music came on TV, some music videos, and on comes Sam Ryder. And I was kind of going, that's a really great song. Very Elton John, very what's the name of the band from the 70s? Supertramp, that kind of thing. And then I said, oh, that's the person who's going to Eurovision. I was like, okay, well, they might have a chance with this one.
I said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the things that you've got to realize in Eurovision, 50% of the votes come from juries, and the juries are music professionals.
Mm-hmm.
and the song has to be good, but also the singer has to be exceptional.
Yeah.
And his vocal ability is exceptional live and recorded. And that's what he ticked those two boxes. The other thing that people don't realize is it's a 2-week media fest. So the artists who go there 2 weeks before are talking to the, Europe's media and the world media, and they have to project themselves positively. If they're negative about the concert or hide away or shy away, they're not going to do well because they're not going to be in the local media for the people who actually matter and vote. And of course, Sam is brilliant at it. Brilliant at interviews, and again, he's so positive about it. And I knew it was in with a real chance. However, I also knew Ukraine was going to win.
Right. Yeah. I think everybody's kind of had a sneaky suspicion that might happen just because, well, the political, aspect of things.
Yeah, it's political voting, but I mean, it's a song that would have been probably the top 5 anyway. Ukraine always sends really good songs, kind of ethno pop, and so yeah, everyone knew all the popular vote was going to go to Ukraine, and the jury vote would go to UK with Sam Ryder. So you've got to send a singer who can really deliver live, and with a song that is attached to a label that's already that can promote it through the airwaves and on the internet. There was a spate of Eurovision picking up singers who had just won the local national song contest, like X Factor or whatever, and some of those singers are really good and probably would do well, but it's usually not the winners of those shows. It's usually further down the line. And with the negativity, particularly in the UK, a lot of artists don't want to be involved with that negativity, of course, and their managers don't want them involved. So getting people to represent the country became more and more difficult. But I think now with Sam, who's playing all over the place and is highly respected, hopefully, and they're using the same formula in the UK now to find the next entrant. That hopefully now that narrative will be dispelled. And, there's so many countries are sending, like Sweden always, they know already that whoever wins their contest is going to be in the top 10.
Yeah.
They just know it. And because their national contest is a contest over 5-6 weeks, 5 or 6 Saturdays, and the national final is staged to a level that all they have to do when they win is to cut and paste that 3 minutes onto the Eurovision stage. That's all they have to do.
Yeah,
the surefire winner already. But then there's another thing that happens now, and I don't know if you've come across a song called "Snap" by Rosa Lynn. She was the Armenian entrant earlier this year, and it didn't do that well. She got to the final and came 23rd.
Yeah. But
the song is the most streamed song ever in Eurovision history. And again, it's one of those songs that was made available on TikTok for you to use.
All right.
It's a great song. It's so radio friendly. It's so internet friendly. I hated the staging of it, and I'm sure that's why she didn't do better.
Fair enough.
Just like a room covered in toilet roll.
Oh, okay.
That didn't work for me.
Right.
If she just stood there with a guitar, and she would have been a lot more
better off.
Would have been a lot more votes. But anyway, so now TikTok is it's a kind of the dominant social medium at the moment.
It is, yeah. I need to get on it. Well, maybe not, but we'll see. So Brian, just before we let you go, I'll reframe the question. So if you had any spare time, what would you do with it?
The spare time, I have to make spare time, and what I do is, this is going to sound so weird because I hate doing it. I clean the house, and I just clean. But reading, COVID, when theatres all closed down, I said, what are we going to do? And the bookshops were posting out books. You could
Yeah.
order them online and they post them out, and Ampost were deliver them for free. So the bookshops were. It was a great thing. And so I used to get delivery of, I asked for contemporary Irish fiction.
Right.
So that's what I've been doing the last number of years, and I still have a stack of books I've yet to read. So it was fiction, not always contemporary Irish, but mostly. So I got to immerse myself in that and enjoyed it very much. And I don't have the time. I can't read as many books now. That used to be my treat at Christmas. When doors are all locked and all the madness is over, you just delve into a book and get lost in it, in the story.
Yeah. I love that too. I think it's so important as well for the head. And I don't mind. Look, cleaning is very good. Mindfulness wise, I like it. I like doing the dishes and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, it's rewarding. But Brian, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest, and thank you so much for chatting to us so extensively about drama and the Lir and all those kind of things.
Well, thank you for asking me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much. Listen, if you wouldn't mind, Brian, I'll take one more minute of your time. I'm going to close this out. Take a quick photo for the mural that I'm going to make on the wall. If you don't mind being a part of the mural on the wall,
okay.
and we'll go from there. So I just got to close out with saying thanks to the usual people. Thank you to John for the technical side of things. I always thank my mum, my dad, granddad, Jaron Calvin for the music, for the logo. We're on YouTube. Subscribe there if you like. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and buymeacoffee.com, whatever it's called. I'm really unenthusiastic about the whole thing. But I'm also on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts. And obviously, thanks to everyone for listening today and tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you all, as the title of the podcast would suggest, next week. Take care.